Morning, everybody.
Morning.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is George Patenode. I'm one of the seniors here at Nebraska Zen Center. And this is in our continuing series of seniors giving Dharma talks. So we'll see how it goes. Today's Dharma talk is called Bodhisattva No Bodhisattva. And the idea of Bodhisattva has been coming through my mind past few weeks or so. In a couple of weeks, we've got a Jukai ceremony coming up where some Sangha members who've been sewing rakusus will go through the Jukai ceremony, and they'll receive the 16 Bodhisattva precepts at the time. And doing a Dharma talk about Bodhisattvas has given me an opportunity to investigate into what my understanding, what the nature is of Bodhisattva practice. So Bodhisattvas, background, and really the other thing about this talk is that this also gives me an opportunity to share 3 stories from NPR.org's, National Public Radio's Unsung Heroes series. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that at all. These are real stories of people who have gotten into a jam. They've had a problem, and it seems out of nowhere, Bodhisattva has showed up and helped them out. And it kind of reminds me of what Nonan used to say, my root teacher, Nonan Quaney, first abbot in Nebraska Zen Center, used to say all the time about when a bodhisattva is needed, one will appear. When a bodhisattva is needed, one will appear. And these stories are really lovely to read and lovely to share. They really are kind of an antidote to what we read in the press and the news and social media lately. But it's kind of an exercise. I'll share these stories with you, and then we'll I guess we can try to spot the bodhisattva in it. It'll be pretty obvious, but give us a chance to talk about it. So first of all, a little background on bodhisattva. This is my current understanding of bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is a combination of 2 Sanskrit words. You got Bodhi and you got Sattva. So Bodhi, generally speaking, Bodhi is awakening or enlightenment, Sattva is person. Though there's other definitions there that I've been looking at that are really kind of interesting. Bodhi in terms of awakening, enlightenment, or what I like to say, enlightening, it's a verb. The Avatam Saka Sutra, the Flower Ornament Sutra, talks about enlightening beings. It's a verb. It's just not anything that's static. It's not necessarily anything that's necessarily assigned to an individual, nor is it any kind of passing mental state. It's action. It's something that's manifested. It's something that's brought forward. Other words for enlightenment. I also like enlightenment in terms of making someone's burden lighter. And so if you're enlightening someone, you're not necessarily sharing information with them, but it's something you've brought forth to make the other person's burden lighter. So that's kind of another way of looking at enlightenment. Sattva, living being, person, but also it's translated as strength, energy, courage, something that's brought forth. Strength, energy, courage. It's also defined as being essence or nature. So I kind of like enlightening essence. It's something more refined, something more provisional, something more transitory, something even perhaps more spiritual, this enlightening essence that's brought forth at the time. Two wings of the Bodhisattva. Daishin's talk a week or two ago, he talked about two wings of the Bodhisattva, wisdom, compassion. In today's chant, of course, we chanted about the Avatamsaka, oh my God, Avatamsaka Sutra, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, there we go, as the Bodhisattva of compassion. And then, of course, there's Manjushri Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. So wisdom, compassion are the two wings of the Bodhisattva. Compassion come in the word compassion is similar to community. So there's no separation there. There's togetherness, right? And passion, there's that, again, that effort, that courage, that energy, that strength coming forward. So there's that, you have the characteristic of no separation, not two, an energy that's being manifested coming forth with compassion. And wisdom, wisdom is an appropriate response. So it's similar to upaya paramita, which is the perfection of wisdom, this perfection of expedient means, the skillful means. Skillful means is something, it's not an absolute truth for upaya, but rather it's something that's practical or provisional. It's something that's just come forward that's just needed at that time. So you have wisdom, compassion, not two, energy coming forth with skillful means. And in our tradition, the Mahayana tradition, a bodhisattva first arouses bodhicitta, or a mind for enlightenment. It's the way-seeking mind. All of us here have, by default, have aroused bodhicitta, the way-seeking mind. But it's a mind that's focused on others. You pursue compassionate way for others, and you delay the realization. Bodhisattva delays their own realization for others. So all these elements of Bodhisattva, I think, come together in these stories I'm going to share for you here. So 3 stories from National Public Radio's My Unsung Heroes series. There's 3 of them here. The first one is titled, Tom, Is That You? How a Stranger Followed Instinct to Find a Lost Child. This story, 6-year-old Tom Sinclair took a wrong turn on the way home and became lost. Spent the night alone in the wilderness. In the morning was found by what I call the red-headed stranger. And he's called that because no one ever got his name. When his job was over with, he split, he left. And there's even a newspaper article about it, but no one knew who this guy's name went. So I'm calling him the red-headed stranger. So each one of these stories is told by the person who was helped. There's some audio here. So let me, they're real quick. This is 2-minute audio. So let me play this here.
Time now for My Unsung Hero, our series from the team at the Hidden Brain podcast. My Unsung Hero tells the stories of people whose kindness left a lasting impression on someone else. Today's story comes from Tom Sinclair. When he was 6, Sinclair wandered away from his family's campsite along Lake Superior, and he got lost along the rocky shoreline. He walked for hours and eventually stopped to sleep. At dawn, he continued to walk. That's when he heard a voice behind him.
I heard someone say, Tom, is that you? And I turned around, and there was the man who became my unsung hero. I believe he was a camper. He was standing on top of a rock, and he came over to me and he said, Tom, how would you like to see your mom? And I said, yes, I would really love to see her. And he me by the hand and he said, well, let's go back this other way. And by then, I was exhausted. I'd been going all night, and he estimated that I'd walked at least 3 miles. And so he picked me up on his shoulders, and he carried me back, and he just talked to me as we walked back to the campsite. And, I didn't know how terrified and exhausted I was until I was on his shoulders and realized I was safe. We got back to the campsite, and he put me in my mom's arms, and she was just crying hysterically, and I never saw him again. When I was found, they had dozens of people looking for me. They had boats and the rangers, and they brought people in from the prison. And what really found me was this one guy who ignored the advice and warnings of the search teams not to go out, and he went the wrong way, and he walked for miles. And he had to have started when it was dark, because it wasn't long after sunrise that he found me and brought me back home. I'm 66 now, and that experience had such a profound impact and effect on shaping the way I look at things, the way I do things, and had an influence on how I raise my children. I always wished that I could have thanked him, and I really feel like he may have saved my life.
That's Tom Sinclair. He lives in Dryden, New York. You can find more stories.
Okay. So, the red-headed stranger, Bodhisattva or no Bodhisattva?
Bodhisattva.
Bodhisattva, yeah. But why though? One question I asked myself, what happened? What if the red-headed stranger never found Tom? Still a Bodhisattva?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably. I'm not going to argue with you there. So, here we have Tom, 6 years old. He's out playing with other kids. Wandered away, thought he could find his camp, and kept walking and walking and walking, thinking that, as he said, I've got the logic of a 6-year-old, and I thought, they can't have hidden a whole campground. It must just be a little ways further. But the campground never appeared, just the trees and the frigid waves of Lake Superior breaking on the rocky coastline. When I finally could go no more, I found an overhang that protected me from the wind. A piece of driftwood was my pillow. I was alone except for the gnats that bit my skin raw as I huddled in the dark. At dawn, he set out again, but that's when he heard a voice behind him. I heard someone say, Tom, is that you? And I turned around, and there was the man who became my unsung hero. So, again, Bodhisattva's compassion and wisdom. So, here you have the red-headed stranger. He was told, as everybody else, to stay in his camp, right? Which I guess makes sense because the authorities would probably want people not to interfere with the search, and perhaps that if people stayed in their camps and if Tom walked by, he'd probably see campfire or voices or the smell of food or something and would make a beeline for the campground. But this guy, the unsung hero here, there was something inside him that said something's not right, something's not right, and that he think he could find Tom. I mean, he was driven by a certain kind of intuitive force. And these other two stories, there's also that theme there with the Bodhisattva. There's kind of this intuitive force that's driving them towards helping. And the other aspect of here is that the red-headed stranger, I believe, used skillful means with Tom. I mean, rather than going up and just grabbing Tom, he said, Tom, is that you? Now, as a kid, you're going to think that, okay, this individual knows me, so he can't really be a stranger. And then he says, how would you like to go see your mom? that's also skillful means, because now you've got a kid who's now building trust, cooperative, right? Wants to work with the redheaded stranger to get him back home. So there's that calm part and compassion. There's that no separation. There's skillful means there to remove any kind of hindrance to working together. So now you got the two wings of the Bodhisattva working together here. And so they get back to camp, and he drops Tom off with his mother and then leaves. It's like the job of the Bodhisattva is finished, and so there's nothing more for the Bodhisattva to do, and so poof, Bodhisattva leaves, right? It's like there's this drive and energy to perform service and use of skillful means, and when the job is over with, the Bodhisattva lets it go and moves on. So I think there's real key elements here of the redheaded stranger being a Bodhisattva. And yeah, I agree, even if he did not find Tom, I still think it would have been a Bodhisattva, right? There was still that energy there to go out and pursue to be of service. So there's that one. Next one. This one's titled, She Lost Her Purse, but Strangers Stepped In to Save the Day. Levon Shafsma, while visiting Chicago, misplaced her purse, and when she returned to search for it, found out that two strangers had retrieved it by force from another and left the purse with a trusted stranger for safekeeping. This is a cool story.
Hero, our series from the team at the Hidden Brain podcast. My unsung hero tells the stories of people whose kindness left a lasting impression on someone else. Today's story comes from Levon Shafsma. Recently, she was in downtown Chicago visiting from Michigan. She spent a few hours in Millennium Park people watching. On the way back to her car, she realized her purse was missing. It held her ID, credit cards, medications, and car keys. Shafsma began to retrace her steps. Eventually, she made her way to a gift shop.
So I went into the gift shop and I went up to the cashier and I said, by any chance, has anyone turned in a black purse? Her eyes got really big and she said, wait a minute, is that yours? And at that moment, all of the tears and sobs came out. All of my anxiety came out, and she said, wow, do I have a story for you? She said two women had come into the gift store with a black purse. They had seen it on a park bench, but as they were walking over, they noticed a man looking inside of it, and they immediately grew suspicious. And so they walked up to the purse and the man and said, sir, is this yours? And he mumbled something like, yeah, my wife lost it. I was looking for it. And they just didn't believe him. And so they actually pretended that it was theirs, and they wrestled it out of his hands and walked quickly to where they saw a security guard near the gift shop and then walked inside. And they waited and waited and waited to see if the owner might return. And then they left. 5 minutes later, I walked in asking for the purse. These women, who I don't know, saved me hours and hours of work canceling credit cards. They rescued me from massive anxiety, and I never got to thank them. I never got to thank them for their courage in noticing something was off and intervening on behalf of a stranger who wasn't even present. I ask myself often, would I have done the same thing? Would I have done that for a stranger? What act of kindness am I willing to do on behalf of someone I don't know? So, if they happen to hear this story, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Levon Shaftsma lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan. You can find more.
Okay, the two women who recovered the purse, Bodhisattva or no Bodhisattva? Yeah, Bodhisattva. I gotta say so. So here you have Levon Shaftsma was in downtown Chicago visiting from Michigan. She spent a few hours in Millennium Park people watching. On the way back to her car, she reached for her keys to realize her purse was missing. She started to panic. Her purse held her ID, credit cards, medications, and hundreds of dollars in cash. I started to feel anxiety, first in my legs, then in my guts, and then right on top of my chest. Shaftsma said I couldn't think straight. Shaftsma retraced her steps. After about an hour, she stopped in front of a Millennium Park gift shop. And I don't know why, but I decided to walk in and just see if maybe someone had turned in my purse, she said. Again, here's this story of there's some unspoken something there, some kind of intuition that's sort of driving this connection here between Bodhisattva and the person himself. She went up to the cashier and asked if anyone had brought in a black purse. The woman's eyes widened, and she said someone had. At that moment, all the tears and sobs came out. Shaftsma said, all my anxiety came out, and she said, wow, do I have a story for you? The cashier said that about half an hour earlier, two women had come into the gift shop with a black purse, shaken by what they experienced. They had spotted the purse on a park bench near the store, but they noticed a man rifling through it and immediately became suspicious. They walked up to the man and asked if it was his. He mumbled that his wife had lost it, and they just didn't believe him, the cashier told them. So they actually pretended that it was theirs, and they wrestled it out of their hands. So then, when I read this story, I kind of thought to myself, man, if I'm ever in jam, I hope these two women are my corner. There's, in The Great Compassionate Heart Dharani, there's a line there about having become as brave as a lion. These two women certainly were, right? They saw something that wasn't right, and they took action, right? And they put themselves in harm's way. They probably didn't know who this guy was. You know, he could fold a weapon, he could have hit, could have knocked him down. But they had this passion, this energy, right? This drive to go take this purse. They didn't think it was right, what was going on here, away from this guy. So compassion there's two aspects of compassion. There's empathy plus action. If it's just empathy with no action, it really sort of becomes just more like sympathy. But here it's empathy plus action. They saw something that wasn't right, and they, in a way, put themselves into the owner of that purse, just the same as they were, right? So there's like a not to aspect there. Purse in hand, the women hurried to the gift shop and went inside. They waited for about half an hour to see if the owner would return, but when no one returned, they left the purse with a security guard. 5 minutes later, Shaftsma walked in. Their gesture was a small moment of awareness and a decision to act, as she said. I think that's real key there. Their gesture was a small moment of awareness and a decision to act. Our practice is a practice of mindfulness. These two women saw this purse sitting there by itself. They were aware of that. They were out of their heads, and they weren't thinking about their usual thoughts about themselves or whatever. And they saw that purse. There's a mindfulness aspect there, and a decision to act. So again, there's that compassion, awareness, and a decision to act. These women, who I don't know, saved me hours and hours of work canceling credit cards. They rescued me from massive anxiety. I never got to thank them for their courage, and noticing something was off and intervening on behalf of a stranger who wasn't even present. Today, Shaftsma often asks herself, how she would have acted in that situation. Would she have noticed something wasn't right and stepped up to help? That's a really, really good question. That's a question I've asked myself about this story too. If I saw a purse just sitting there, first of all, would I even notice it? But maybe it would be a little odd that there's a purse just sitting there by itself on a park bench. Would I have acted in a situation like this? It's really kind of a dicey situation. I mean, if I went over and picked it up, suddenly I could be the person who's stolen the purse, probably. I don't know. It's interesting that these two women were working in concert together. Another question would be, if it was just one of the women by herself, would she have acted the same way? I think with these two women working together, they were feeding off of each other's courage to go after the purse and wrestle away from this guy, right? But that's a really good question. I mean, would I have noticed that? And would I have done something about it? She said, what act of kindness am I willing to do on behalf of someone I don't know? Another really good question, right? That's a good question of a bodhisattva practice. What act of kindness am I willing to do on behalf of someone I don't know? Right? It's like these two women put themselves again in the shoes, as it were, of the purse owner. They don't know who this woman was, but they feel like they need to act on her behalf, right? So if they happen to hear this story, I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. So these stories are also nice too, because everybody, the people that are helped out are just expressing so much gratitude. This probably happened years later, years ago, and yet she has so much gratitude for it, which is part of these stories here. So the two women, yeah, I definitely think Bodhisattva. They had strong empathy and resilience, and they placed themselves potentially in harm's way to retrieve the purse. So yeah, definitely Bodhisattva. And one more. This one's titled, In the Midst of Grief, a Woman is Comforted by a Stranger on the Subway. Maureen Futner, grieving the sudden loss of her older sister, needed to ride the BART, which is the Bay Area Rapid Transit. It's the subway in the San Francisco area. Felt emotionally vulnerable. A stranger offered empathy.
Time now for My Unsung Hero, our series from the team at the Hidden Brain podcast. My Unsung Hero tells the stories of people whose kindness left a lasting impression on someone else. Today's story comes from Maureen Futner. Maureen's older sister died earlier this year, and the death was sudden and unexpected.
I walked around in shock for quite a while. Just a few days after she died, I had to attend a work event. So I slapped a smile on my face, and I got on a downtown BART train. That's our subway in the Bay Area. Well, given my mood, I sort of took up a 2-seat space on the train, hoping I could just be left alone. It's rush hour, and the train is getting more and more crowded, and a woman with a cane gets on. I jump up to offer her my seat, and she immediately gestures for me to sit down. And she sits beside me. She promptly turns and looks directly at me and asks, "So, how's your day going?" This isn't something people generally do on BART, but in that moment, something in me knew. I just had to be honest. "It's been a rough week," I said. "We lost my sister." "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that," she says. And she went on to share that her wife had passed away, that it had been 10 years and it had been hard for her to move on, so she joined a bereavement group recently, and that had helped. Well, pretty quickly, the PA message announcing my stop interrupted us. I had more to say to this woman. I wanted to let her know how bereft I would be if I lost my wife, who's my rock. I decided just to simply introduce myself, and she extended her hand. I'm Simone. You take care, Maureen. Simone, if you happen to hear this, your connection and your honesty helped buoy me that evening. And I hope you continue to heal on your journey with grief.
Maureen Footner of San Francisco, California. You can find...
Okay. This is kind of a trick question. Who's the Bodhisattva in this story?
They both were.
Exactly, thank you. Right. They're both Bodhisattvas, right? They're both helping each other. Right. So, the person telling the story, Maureen Footner, she says her older sister died. This is the story from last year. The death was sudden and unexpected, leaving Footner and her family in shock. It was difficult to think about being out in public, let alone going to work, but just a few days later, Footner had to attend a business event in San Francisco where she lives. She was less than enthused, but she knew she needed to do it. So I made myself get spiffed up. I slapped a smile on my face, and I got on a downtown BART train, which is our subway in the Bay Area, Footner said. It was rush hour, and the train got busier and busier. Footner tried to take up 2 seats so that she could avoid having to sit next to anyone. So here you have an individual who is emotionally vulnerable, right? She's grieving. She doesn't really want to be out in public, but she's got to, right? So if we're feeling emotionally vulnerable, right, our defenses are up, right? We're setting boundaries up. I certainly would, because I don't want any kind of stranger, annoying me, I guess, for the lack of a better word. But as we got close to the financial district, a woman with a white cane gets on. I jump up to offer her my seat, and she immediately gestures for me to sit down. So even though she was grieving and emotionally vulnerable and probably had her defenses up, she saw somebody else who she thought was also vulnerable, an older one with a white cane coming, getting on a very busy train, right? And she just got out of herself, right? She just jumped out of that grief and instinctively just offered her a seat, right? Again, there's like this kind of this unspoken connection between bodhisattvas or bodhisattva and the person being helped out. The woman insisted that there was room for 2 and took the seat next to Footner. Moments later, the stranger turned to her and asked, "How's your day going?" This isn't something people generally do on BART, Footner said, but in that moment, something in me knew I had to be honest. Again, there's kind of this intuition going on here. It's been a rough week, Footner told the woman. We lost my sister. "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that," the woman responded. "I know how painful losing a loved one is." So all of a sudden, you've got 2 people who connected with each other, right? You now have this community of 2. You have this calm part of compassion. These 2 people who are now engaged with each other in their grief. This story reminds me of the Buddhist parable of Kisa Gotami. The Buddhist parable of Kisa Gotami. Kisa Gotami, who I'm just going to call it Gotami because apparently Kisa, everybody called her Kisa, which meant skinny. So she was called Skinny Gotami, which a little body shaming going on 2,500 years ago, but that's where it goes. So we're just going to call her Gotami. The story is that she was a commoner. She fell in love with a wealthy man. The wealthy man's family objected to the marriage, but the wealthy man's family said, "Okay, you can marry him, but you have to produce an heir," which he did. She had 1 son who was about 2 years old in the story. She was out in the marketplace with her son, and for some reason, her son died. Just fell over, died. It was so sudden that Gautami didn't believe that her son had died, so she picked him up and figured that there was medicine available to revive him. So she started to go from door to door, asking strangers for help. You know, here's my son. Do you have some? He's asleep or he's passed out. Do you have some medicine to help him? And of course, whoever answered the door looked at the son and looked at her and went, "There's nothing we can do for you," because they probably saw the son had died and said, you know, and then probably just closed the door on her. And she went to several doors that way until finally she went to one door where the person said, "We can't help you, but next door is a Brahma. I'm sure he could probably help you out." So she said, "Thank you." So she went, you know, knocked on the door of the Brahma, and the Brahma opened the door and saw obviously that the child is deceased, but said, using some skillful means and compassion, the Brahma said, "There is medicine available, but you'll need to see this well-regarded teacher and his Sangha that's in town now." So it showed him where they could go. Well, that, of course, was the Buddha. That's the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. So she's like, "Great." Spider?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bodhisattva.
Yeah. Spiders are part of our Sangha. So she finds the Buddha, and the Buddha said, "Yes, there is medicine, but what you'll need to do is go into town, and the medicine's available from somebody who can give you a mustard seed." She thought, that's a little weird. That's medicine, because mustard seed is fairly common spice. So she said, "Okay, I'll get a mustard seed and I'll cure my son." She turns to walk away, and the Buddha said, "But it has to be from a house that has never experienced grief." And she's like, "That's also kind of weird, but no problem." So she goes, you know, door to door, saying, "I need a mustard seed," still carrying her dead child. And they said, "Of course we have a mustard seed." And then she said, "But it has to be from a house that has never experienced grief." Well, suddenly, you know, everybody in the house said, "Oh yeah, we've lost a parent, we lost a child, we lost a spouse, we lost a relative. So we've experienced grief." She goes, "Okay, well this won't do." So she goes in the next house. "Hi, I need a mustard seed, but it has to be from a house that doesn't experience grief." And of course, the people at the door say the same thing. "Oh yeah, we've experienced a loss, you know, parent, a child, a spouse, you know, we've experienced grief here as well." So door to door to door to door, she keeps going and experiencing the same thing, until finally she realizes that grief is universal and that the acceptance of impermanence is key to healing. Grief is universal and that the acceptance of impermanence is key to healing. She has that realization, buries her child, leaves her husband, was probably a good thing, get away from his family, and goes up to the Buddha and says, "I understand now that grief is universal." And the Buddha said, "Yes, there was medicine, but the medicine was for you, Gautami." She thought the medicine was for her child, but the Buddha, using skillful means, said, "No, the medicine was for you. You, the one who needed to be saved." And so she became a nun of the Buddha. So here you have two women who were really bodhisattvas for each other in that moment, who were reminding each other that grief is universal and that acceptance of impermanence is key to healing. So yeah, I agree. They're both bodhisattvas. She asked if there was some bereavement course she could take. And she said, again, here's this gratitude. "Simone, if you happen to hear this, your connection and your honesty helped buoy me that evening, and I hope you continue to heal on your journey with grief." So again, there's that, she's not necessarily thinking about it herself, she's thinking about the other person there. Now, what's my story about journey about understanding Bodhisattva practice. Well, when I started Zen practice, my God, more than 20 years ago, my idea of Bodhisattva, I grew up in the church, so for me, Bodhisattva was equivalent to, I don't know, like a Catholic saint or an apostle. I guess Jesus, right? Jesus, Bodhisattva. I guess you gotta say that. Something more mythical, right? Like a Bodhisattva would be something almost angelic, right? I think it's toward the end of my first year at Zen Center, I was assigned to do Zazen instruction. Sarah's doing Zazen instruction this Sunday. But I was a little miffed about it because I had my agenda, right? I wanted to come in, sit Zazen, do a little service, listen to a lecture, have a cup of coffee, and more importantly, not be bothered, right? And that was taken away from my agenda. So, as conversations often sometimes happen with Enos, and I think it was kind of like a busy service that day, and I remember the conversation very well. The Eno was Elizabeth, and she was in the kitchen, and we had this conversation right in front of the stove. And I was going on whining about how I didn't want to do Zazen instruction, because it's like, Nonin wasn't doing Zazen instruction around that time, so really just about every Sunday, people were coming in to do it right off the street, strangers to Zen Center, wanting Zazen instruction. And so I was like whining with her about, oh, it's not fair, I don't want to do it, I don't want to greet strangers at the door. And then I said, but don't you have to be like certified to do Zazen instruction? Seriously, that's what I said. I said, yeah, George, yeah, the Red Cross has a certification program for life-saving CPR and Zazen instruction. Yeah, sure, George. I remember that conversation because here's Elizabeth, right? Give me the classic Eno look, which seems to suggest, I told a story during Rahatsu. I've got 700 items to do this morning, George, and you're number 39 on my list, and oh my God, service starts in 8 minutes. How can I help you out, George? She's looking at me like this, over top of her glasses like this, and I'm whining. And she cut me off right there about the certification. And she goes, George, I've seen you sit Zazen before. I've seen you do the forms before. You do them perfectly fine. There's a checklist upstairs. You will be okay. Greet the stranger at the door. Show them around. Introduce yourself. Be nice. Go upstairs. Go through the checklist. This is Gasho. This is Shashu. This is the Cosmic Mudra. Get them in the position they can sit Zazen. This is how you hold your sutra book. This is how you enter and exit the Zendo. And then sit a little Zazen. And when you hear the bell rings downstairs, that's time for service. You come downstairs and then we'll do service. Okay, George, And now it's 5 minutes to service, George, right? So yeah, I did Zazen instruction because, well, that's what I was asked to do. It was awkward as all hell, but I had a checklist to go through, and it was like, seriously, every Sunday, strangers were coming in the door, so I had to greet them. Hi, my name is George. Go to Nebraska, Zen Center. Can I show you around? Oh my God, this is horrible. And then go upstairs, and then when the office was upstairs, and then show them go through the Zazen instruction. And I sort of developed some scripts, routine and how to do it, but I was still resentful as all hell because I wanted to sit Zazen, I wanted to do a little service, I wanted to listen to an interesting lecture and a cup of coffee, and not be bothered, right? And so I was still resentful, but I couldn't talk to Eno about it because we already had that conversation. So. But then Dharma talk, not too long, and this is weird, Nonin would always pick up on things in the Sangha, unspoken words. Again, Nonin was kind of a spooky guy. He did a Dharma talk where he was talking about bodhisattvas, and he said, a bodhisattva gives up their agenda to help somebody else out. This is Nonin's voice talking. A bodhisattva gives up their agenda to help somebody else out. And when I heard gives up their agenda, seriously, it was that classic little turning word that you see in the literature of Zen practice all the time, you know. Just a light went on in my head and I was like, yeah, that's right. I had an agenda, but I had to give that up to help somebody else out. That's a bodhisattva? Wow. Me? Am I acting like a bodhisattva? So is a bodhisattva a person? Is a bodhisattva a state of mind? In my understanding, bodhisattva is this energy coming forth, something that's manifested, right? Granted, I was told to do this, so I'm getting partial credit, but it's bodhisattva sees that calm passion and gives skillful means. They interrupt their agenda to do a little bit of service. When the service is over with, bodhisattva disappears, right? Because it's that manifested energy. That's something that's coming forth. So that was really kind of opening my eyes a little bit about, oh, so that's bodhisattva practice. And the more I started to kind of see that, what Nonan was teaching was bodhisattva practice all the time. It was subtle. Nonan didn't really connect the dots, like he did that one time for me. But Zen practice is really bodhisattva practice. We're practicing to get ourselves in positions to where we can, just for that moment, give up our agenda, offer a little help. Could be anything, right? People were cleaning the Zendo today, right? We're cleaning Zen Center. I didn't do that, right? But provide a little service, and when that service is done with, disappears. Bodhisattva disappears. So that's my understanding of bodhisattva so far. We should, we'll need to all come to our own understandings of bodhisattva practice through our own personal experience. Experience is the best teacher around here. So this is my understanding of bodhisattva practice. Come to your own understanding of bodhisattva practice. And though we don't sit with koans around here, let me leave you with this koan here. You can sit with it, you cannot sit with it. You can contemplate with it, you cannot contemplate it. It's up to you, it's your practice. So here's a question. How many bodhisattvas does it take to screw in a light bulb? And my understanding is 3. 1 to give up their agenda, 1 to give an appropriate response, and 1 to let it go. That can be 1 bodhisattva, that can be 1,000,000 bodhisattvas, but in my understanding, it's that behavior, that manifestation. Give up their agenda, give an appropriate response, and then let it all go afterwards. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
11:30.